Okay, we're live.
I will call to order the DuPont Tree Advisory Commission meeting on Monday, November 18th, 2023 at 5:05 p.m. And can we get a roll call, please?
Of course. Commissioner Chacott,
Yes.
Chair Clark,
Here.
Commissioner King, here, Commissioner Sanish.
Commissioner Stanish will be out tonight.
Okay, so I'll need a motion to excuse her.
Okay.
So moved.
Yes. So
Second, third.
Okay. And Commissioner Cheney.
present.
Thank you.
Is there any public comment tonight?
There are no public comments.
Can we have an approval of tonight's agenda? Can we
Yes.
get a motion to approve tonight's agenda?
Yes.
And can we get a second?
I'll second it.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? And moving on to item number 5, we will approve the meeting minutes from October 9th. Do we have a motion to approve the meeting minutes from October 9th?
So moved.
So approved, yeah.
Second.
I second it.
And all in favor, say aye.
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 And I forgot my words. What?
Motion carried. Move on to.
I don't know. I lost it. Sorry about that. All right, moving on to item number 6. We have our discussion items. Item number 6.1 is the work calendar, and we have on here the heritage trees, which I was finally able to make a few edits. I thought it was going to be a lot more, so I cut out, some time to make the edits. It really wasn't that many edits that I made to the document. I know when I went back and watched the meeting from, I think it was in July, we had asked about putting something in there small about the process of nominating a heritage tree, and then kind of from there, after the nomination, what would that look like? So I had added into there. However, I don't have any of that printed off right now. So if we could just all take a chance over the next month, I would assume, to just look through it. If we have any recommendations to add in there, I just don't know if we need to have everything finalized or just the program guide and the nomination form. And once it starts rolling, if we can then add the documents of the tree mapping later. I know that was something that had been brought up. And getting like the GPS coordinates. I know we have documented trees. We don't have the GPS coordinates. We would need to make everything online accessible, including the nomination form. I just wanted to verify if there's anything else that we needed besides the program guide and the nomination form to be able to roll it out.
What I recall from a couple of months ago was just we needed, and I think you might already have it in there, was the piece about the owner saying
Right. So
that was the form we were missing last time. I think.
updated, what
Okay.
I did is I updated the nomination form to now have 2 sections, and it clarifies if the nominator is not the owner of the tree, then the owner needs to fill out this second section.
Okay.
Which is the same as, it looks the same as the nominator part, but that's, giving the owner's information so we can follow up with them as well and make sure that they're okay with it, and acknowledging that as a tree, a heritage tree. Anything else added into the heritage tree section that anybody had? That was, I spilled water. Is there anything else? All right, from there, then we'll move on. If we could just look over those documents and then give any feedback to anything else that we would need in place before rolling that out. Because I know at the Moon Tree event, we did talk about heritage trees. We had a poster board, just, letting everyone know that this is something that we're thinking about and to look for more information. So now that the word is out there and we have everything put in place, it would, if we can just get it rolling, we can just be measuring trees and adding to that list.
So rolling is, do we have to roll in front of the city council? Is that where we're rolling next?
Well, that's what I was just, my
Okay.
wheels were turning right there is whether or not that would be, I would think that we may, so we're not, this is, if I'm understanding your intent, is that this would be a voluntary process?
Yeah, so either what would be happening is as a tree board or, other kind of like tree enthusiasts in the community, we're either finding big trees or trees that are significant, or somebody is volunteering that this is, a tree that's a memorial tree or a significant tree, and then they're able to nominate that tree. And then that tree would then go on the list. And then the thought would be for the future, getting those trees marked somehow
With a plaque or something.
with a plaque or
Mhm.
something, and being able to celebrate those trees.
Well, my first thought is that this is because we're talking about a voluntary community engagement sort of a thing, and not going into anything that would require any regulatory or anything like that. Is that we would just keep that internal to the tree commission, and I think that it would be a really nice idea, though, to bring it in front of the council, to brief them about this is something that you've been working on and that you feel is important, and it just describe what that process would look like. But I'm not thinking that this is going to be anything that's going to come before them, on their agenda as a resolution or a consent to do that. Because again, the tree commission, you're putting together this voluntary, almost like an adjunct, the stormwater stuff that we do internal to the city is we run games and programs and name the stream and trying to get people supportive and understanding about how important it is. And my understanding is that's really what we're trying to do with the Heritage Tree Program. And if I'm right about that.
Yeah, that, and then, what would come with that is the protection of those trees. So getting those trees, just like the Gary Oaks are protected, the
Mhm.
heritage trees would also be
So
protected.
So the title heritage tree affords some protections. It is used somewhere, I believe, in a document
it
we have.
is used in our code. I
And-
think, no, it's landmark tree, not heritage.
Landmark,
Yeah.
so we may have to change our designation of our program, but so one of the things we started out doing, it occurs to me right now, is trying to scrub what we already had and figure out what we already had, whether it was the apple trees in the orchard, and then what would classify and not classify in that. And then under that, there is this category where the public can nominate just a weirdly shaped tree or this tree or, and that's the community involvement piece. So I do see there's two actions, and that's why I ask about rolling it in front of do we roll it in front of the council? Because one of the labels has teeth, and the question I'm asking, I guess in my head and out loud right now, is are the landmark trees above the heritage tree, or are the heritage trees, the landmark trees, the same thing? Or because they are a protected class in the ordinances, and we have a couple that, we have documentation here but no documentation over here. And that's one of the other initiatives we had was like, how do we get the ones we already had? And I think that was Larry's concern initially too. You know, we cut down memorial trees. We don't have a plan for the ones we already had. And so there's that. And then there's the community involvement in the new, but the two things in my mind are related.
Mhm. So I think maybe to just move ahead with the community voluntary program that you've developed and allowing people to come in and submit their applications. And so in that form, it's the property owner who is designating the tree on their own property.
Mhm.
And then in doing so, the protection piece is their willingness to file something about that tree, to protect it in the, basically a title report or something like that.
Mhm.
Taking, so as those are coming in, I don't really I haven't really figured out, like any of us, what do you do with all the stuff that happened in the past, right?
And I had a question about that too, because if I were on the outside and I were trying to protect a tree, I might come in and FOIA everything to do with trees and RICO or something like that, or tree,
Yeah.
anything like that. But as a tree board, can we ask for that? Like the history, where is the history and how do we assemble it so we can move forward? Because there are, we found the documentation for the pioneer tree at the museum, which is only a quasi city organization. And so where is it in our city and how do we, so again, if I were sitting on the outside and I wanted to do
Mhm.
something for that tree, I might FOIA everything to do with culturally modified trees or heritage trees in the city, going back to Rico's days, because that's when the assessments and
Right.
all the surveys were done. So does that exist and can we ask for that?
Well, definitely we could ask for it, but the question is whether or not it still exists. Because if, we're going quite a ways back, and if the documents weren't required for retention, how you have the State Archive Office,
Mhm.
they have a whole Janet could probably speak to this better than I, because she's our retention person, but they have a whole schedule for what type of document it is and what is the length that you have to keep it.
Mhm.
There are certain things that you keep forever, but I don't think that what we would be looking for, it's possible that those records don't exist anymore, but it definitely would be something where, as a tree commission, I don't think you'd have to do a FOIA, but what we would want to do is give you access to go through all the files upstairs looking for it.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, you're different than somebody just on the outside.
Yeah, I did. I
right?
didn't think I would
Yeah.
do a FOIA request, but
Yeah.
it's like, how do I get that assembly of,
Mhm.
and so
And-
if we can go in and do that, that's great. And, some of the older stuff actually is recorded at the Tacoma Public Library. So they have a lot of the surveys.
Yeah, it's a big research project is what it is. Yeah, if we could find, maybe an intern or
If
something
it
that
means
would.
we get to keep some of the vegetation that's looking
Mhm.
at,
Mhm.
being gone, it's worth it to me.
But then you get into, so it's like and I don't know, with all of the past documents, I don't have any sense of, other than what made it into the DuPont Municipal Code for the landmark trees, the Gary Oaks and landmark trees,
Mhm.
those were surveyed, and we have in the planning department, we have a, map, although it's, they're not great maps, and we have the preservation piece, but I don't know what happened in the past about some of these other, heritage tree. They didn't make it into any kind of regulatory document. So
That's what we're trying to rectify
Yeah.
now, is to say, hey, those trees existed and they're important, and how are we going to work to keep them, I think.
Mhm.
And then what are the new ones out there? And then tracking down, I can't remember what they called it, the invisible archaeology, but the trees that they were protected by not being mentioned anywhere, but they
Oh.
exist. And so finding all that stuff. So
Right.
that's how all this got rolling with Friends of DuPont Trees. And this is like clarifies how we go forward, but we still want to look backward and assemble what we already have as well.
Yeah.
Can I ask a few things? Well, number one, I mean, and just thinking aloud, has there been an attempt before of documenting heritage trees in the past?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay, one. Secondly, I mean, if there is, are there any documents where we can find in, in the city records, where we can, just to make sure that there is something there or not? If there is not, then like we have done a lot of work on actually, defining what is a heritage tree. I think we have done that. Now, the other thing is, how do we disseminate the information to the DuPont, citizens as to where to go to, to nominate that tree, and go on from there. So I'm not sure, where we are, in that. My personal feeling is we need to get this going,
Mm-hmm.
And for that, I think the first thing is look and make sure that if there are no records, then given what we have right now, come up with a document and somehow disseminate to the people, in our newsletter or city that there is a attempt of documenting these heritage trees, and we like you to if you know any one of them, just contact so and so.
Mm-hmm.
It could be either one of us.
Yeah, I think that is a great idea. It sounded like there was some work done by the tree commission to identify some of them and make a list.
Yeah, we
that
had
right?
started to document. I think we have 5 on the document that I had sent. I believe it was the July meeting. I had sent that document out, and then we had discussed altering the what's it called? The document, the program guide
Mhm.
document. And so I altered that per our suggestions that we talked about in that meeting, and the nomination form. And so if we can get that solidified by next month, my understanding is we can just implement that program, and then the other layers of it, like going to the planning commission with it, getting it implemented officially so that those trees are protected. Could we do that later and still
Yeah.
have this?
Yeah, and get it started. I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, one more thing. This is just out of interest, I went around at one point on my bike and basically identified, what trees, deserve some, what do you call, I don't know exactly, the criteria, which fits into it, but I do have a list at home I can share with the committee, which I thought these are heritage trees and they should be preserved. So I have that document, and I'll be happy to present it to this committee, and then we can see whether they meet the criteria or not.
Well, that's where we could get, if we could submit that list and have that list, then we can plan for, volunteer groups to go out or whatnot and get them measured, and then we can document them, how we did the other ones.
I think the step I would do, because I think we're getting a nicely formed, forward plan here, is if you have a list that you've.
Yeah, I
wrote
will
down.
have pictures, just out of my interest, I took those pictures and
Mhm.
I have it and I know the locations.
And then you have 5 more, right? And so I think we start with that list.
Okay,
The step that I would do next is, if they're on private property, then we should send a letter to that landowner and say, hey, we have, we're the tree commission, and we're really interested in identifying and protecting trees that are heritage trees. I mean, we could make a very nice little note to that landowner. Are you interested, and enclose the nomination form and see if they respond back. I guess what I'm saying is that on this first step, if the landowner isn't interested in doing a voluntary protection measure for that tree, that there's not much more we can do until we go to that next layer of how do we manage to preserve and protect. And then, of course, that's where we bring in, that has to go through a regulatory process.
great point.
Yeah.
I totally agree with you. The only thing I've done was identification for my own interest, but then I did not know whether this belonged to some.
Right.
So that will be a good thing to look at it.
Yeah, and send that letter. But I think what we're really talking about here is a lot of PR and getting people. So you do have a tree commission website. And it seems to me that we would use that and use the city's Facebook, and we could always do a utility insert. That's another way we communicate, and just try to get people aware of and interested in this work. And tell them where they can find the nomination form and all that. Now, I think we have a staff person that we could probably have working on updating that web page and getting that information out there. And then, that's the first part of hopefully trying to reach people and getting them to nominate one, or nominate something that they have that they think is important, or writing into the tree commission that they saw this tree while they were out. It looks like it could be a pretty special tree. And so I see that then all coming into the tree commission and being reviewed at your regular meetings. And, then you're going to need to have the part where, somebody is going out to confirm whether or not it fits the criteria for a heritage tree.
Yeah, so I know we had discussed kind of like the cadence that we would review. So in the document that I updated, I did put quarterly on there because it just seemed like that would give us an ample amount of time to get people out to view the tree, and be able to respond, with enough time, because I just don't see monthly us being able to, get,
Mm-mm.
I don't know how many requests are going to be coming in, but I just want to give us ample amount of time, especially at first when we're not used to doing it.
And I think that if we focus on this first voluntary step, and if we find that people are really excited and we get some synergy and momentum going, of course, that always helps then to really bring something forward to council to say the community, this is really important to the community. So we don't know until we put it out there and see, but I suspect there will be other people that are really interested in this. And I do think that my question for you is whether or not you all see this as a tree preservation goal, or as a historic cultural goal for the city. And I'd be interested in your comments.
I mean, I really think it would be
Yeah.
both.
Go ahead.
Yeah, it would be both, and they're both important reasons to have it. And just the community piece too aspect, we talked about different ideas with it down the road, maybe a heritage tree walk where you can walk and see the different heritage trees and getting the community excited about it. So, there's many different reasons. Protecting the trees is an important part, and the identification and preservation of them being documented to know that they were here and the reasons why they were here, I think is important as well.
Yeah, there are actually, I would say it's a win-win situation in the sense, number one, it goes both, for preservation and for getting younger people interested, in the environment, in the ecosystem, because right now there is a big awareness, even in schools, people are taught about the ecosystem and how the green gas effect, the effect. So the biggest advantage of that is of the entire thing is awareness to the people, that these are not just trees are there. There is a purpose behind that. So, there are many things. I can write up to 10 good reasons, but again, to summarize, it is a win-win situation for the community. I mean, you look at the aesthetic value, there's people are looking at communities. People are actually taking photographs from above, basically, and coming up, what is the density, of the trees there. And that says something about not just the climate of the area, but the aesthetic value and the cultural awareness people have. So there are a lot of things associated with that.
Yeah. Yeah, go ahead, Commissioner.
So I wasn't there for the genesis of this idea, and I haven't seen all the documents about it, but I would make the observation that it seems to me the Heritage Deed program is really more cultural than it is just about tree canopy, because we're talking about the history and the significance to individual people. I certainly think there is also distinct from that a reason to preserve trees for the tree canopy benefits in terms of air quality, groundwater, on and on and on.
Well, it's
But
preserving
as
the
it's-
oldest trees in the community too, I think.
Yeah,
Would be
yeah.
the cultural part.
But there's also the landmark tree
Mhm.
designation, which really gets, I think, the oldest native tree species by virtue of their size. So
I
just to
think-
answer your question, I think it's more of a cultural thing with the Heritage Tree Program. And that would, my thinking would be a full distinction in terms
And I'm glad that
of the tree canopy preservation needs to apply to
Right.
all the tree
Right.
canopy.
that's ecological.
this.
It's not even history or culture, although it is part of our culture. But I recently was talking to somebody from the tribe, and I really think we need to stop viewing things as history. I really love the cultural aspect of saying it's whether it's old, it's a veteran tree,
Mhm.
or a character tree, or a rare tree. It's a cultural value, and rather than something that was a place and a time. And that's something I really got clear from the tribe is we really need to focus on all of our cultural assets. And that's what these are. And whether they become assets for tourism or just, a lot of stuff. I did have a friend who was really into history, but now I would think of it as culture. Is it in a transient society that we are finding things that actually root us, and trees are, figuratively, and actually tell us where we are and what we have, that we start really focusing on our cultural assets and put history under that and have cultural assets first. And that way we can start meeting with other groups. And then I would put the canopy in our cultural assets as well, because we were designed, even before we needed this for climate adaptation, we were designed as a treed city, which is always what worries me about our lack of street tree guidance and mandates, because the whole place was supposed to be treed from the very beginning. And so I don't see it as something that should be voluntary, which is the term we've used in the past, but that's one of our cultural assets as well. It's all cultural asset. So, and I'm so glad you asked that question because
Yeah, and the reason, that I'm asking this and we're having this discussion is, we're going to be starting the comprehensive plan, right? And so, which translates to these goals and policies that we update in this plan will, of course, translate into code, regulatory language to implement them. And we know, for example, that the tree preservation and the urban canopy is something that is being mandated in this round of updates under our State Growth Management Act. Because of what we've talked about, the greenhouse gas emission and the fear that we're losing tree canopy, and what is that doing to our air and everything. So, and their equity piece as well, that there are people that live in places that don't have trees, and wealthier people get to live in treed neighborhoods, for example. So that is one thing that I have to do and will be bringing up to you as we work through that. We also are going to strengthen the historical and cultural goals and policies. They're quite weak in our current comp plan. And so that's why I was asking the question, about how you perceive these goals. And we will be bringing these to you for your input as we go through the comp plan update. So that was helpful for me to kind of hear you think it through at this early stage.
And when you put it that way, definitely the cultural piece stands out more, having that cultural value, and it is only building on our culture for the future too.
And you're having both. So it's not one or the other. It's both, but where does it, where do we want to discuss it in the goals and policies that we have in our comprehensive plan? And so then, of course, that's where does it go into, obviously, preservation of trees, or whether or not they're landmark, or then we can import a heritage tree definition into that chapter. They would all go into that chapter based on that.
Yeah, so it sounds to me like the historical part, the historical preservation part of the comp plan, the heritage tree program would fall under that.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
the other part of the comp plan that's for the greenhouse gas, global warming,
Mhm.
climate change is broader to the entire tree canopy.
Right. Yep.
So I think from a putting things in buckets for the policy perspective,
Mhm.
you need to have both. And then there's reasons for both.
Yeah, exactly. The purpose statement for
Yeah, the purpose
a
is
little
just a
bit
little
different.
bit different, right?
Yeah.
Because you can have a broad policy that applies to all the tree canopy that might not be appropriate for specific trees that have been identified of cultural significance.
Particularly, you're absolutely right, particularly when you usually have to have some allowance for people to remove trees under a tree preservation ordinance and maybe replant a similar tree. You can't replace you can't do that. So they are going to be treated a little bit different yeah. Well, good. Thank you for that. So, I mean, I think, we're talking about, as I understand it, maybe getting some interest in getting upstairs to dig through the boxes. We actually do have an inventory sheet, whether or not it's going to help you find anything, because I suspect that embedded in like all of those plats, all of the plats that went through for Northwest Landing and stuff, there's going to be, reports and discussion, and you might find where they said like, hey, we've identified some sort of special tree, but it was never carried forward out of that report from, maybe being a condition or anything that would actually protect it. So it will be, I don't know what you'll find, and it'll be very time consuming, but certainly that's an option.
And does survey that you have, the actual location of the already surveyed trees, is that done with GPS coordinates?
So the tree inventory that we have, the old tree inventory that we have is done with GPS coordinates. But the Gary Oaks, so back in Rico's day, and that was not GPSed to my knowledge. We have like this really ridiculous, looks like a mimeograph actually back, that shows these quadrants and these trees that were oaks, and that's what we're using. So we really, really need to get, find the money, I think, and have somebody come out, or if there's some grant money available, to do a proper inventory and GPS all these trees. And that's been on my list. And I know that, was some grant money through the DNR. I kind of initially, I think we talked about it months ago, I initially reached out and it just kind of fell through.
I thought there was some, but they might have been.
Yeah, so we'll discuss the new one in a bit too, but yeah, so we'll go ahead and move on from the heritage tree plan. I think if I just kind of want to recalibrate and make sure that everyone can go ahead and look at the documents that we have, and if we need to add anything, or just really looking at the verbiage of everything too, and just making sure.
Well, why don't we actually get the document and put it in the agenda packet
Okay.
so that everybody has that to review, and then coming into the next meeting, you could go through the review of that document and finalize it
And
here.
finalize it here at that next meeting.
Mhm.
Okay.
I mean, if that's doable, it sounds like you've got pretty much everything ready.
Right.
Mhm.
Okay. So it would just be those two documents. We'll plan on reviewing them over the month. If anyone can just look over them, send me the reviews, and edits, and then I can edit that document. We can look over it the next meeting and
Yeah, so when you
on it.
get, well, yes, exactly. So when you get it to that kind of that final draft, send it to Janet. So then it'll be on your agenda. It'll be so that other people can pull it up that may be interested, of course. And then at your meeting, you'll discuss it and vote to, that it's final and we're ready to put it out there to the public.
Okay. All right. So that
'Cause
will be the plan.
we'll want that on the, the formal record of your meeting.
Right. So that'll be the plan for the next meeting, in regard to the heritage trees. But for time purposes, we will go ahead and move on to item number 7. We have 7.1. We have the new business of the tree permit process, which this is something that was sent out to us. And if you could just explain again kind of where this document came from. I know that it's a new document.
This is just really a guide.
Okay.
And it is taking the DuPont Municipal Code tree preservation ordinance and in illustrating it's for you to understand, what we were working with now and moving forward, what we might want to work towards, getting a little stronger preservation language. But this just is showing you, and also we put it out for property owners when you need a permit, when you don't need a permit. So basically, if there is a tree on city property, and somebody, this happens quite a bit, we get somebody that calls and complains, or they ask for that tree to be cut because it's hanging over the fence, or they think it might fall on their roof, or it's a street tree and the roots are pulling the sidewalk and maybe going into their lawn. They're going to ask the city to take care of that tree.
Okay.
So what we do then on city property, if it's a street tree, we will go out. We have a little process where we send somebody out. They evaluate what we're being told by the resident about that tree. and then we make a determination if it's a healthy, safe tree, we see no issues with it. Then we will tell the person that is complaining about it that we really don't see the need to do anything with that tree. If for some reason it's a diseased tree or hazardous, or we agree, or it may be endangering private property, then of course, we will cut that tree. And either we will cut the tree or we will allow the person, maybe it's behind their property in an open space, to cut the tree. Or a lot of times people in the street trees will want to remove the street tree and replant it with something. So that's where that city approved tree list is very important for us to get, because then we're going to say, yes, if you want to go ahead and cut down that tree in front of your house, because we agree with you, it's a problem, you need to replant it with, here's the list, one of these kinds of trees that we've approved to go into the planting strip. When
The planting strip is private property or city. It's city. It's
right of
under
way.
the city property,
Yep,
the city
Yep.
strip
yep.
in front of people's homes.
Yep. Yep. And so if we, what we've done is, if it's going to be somebody that is asking to dig up because it's the city, well, I'm sorry, it's the city's right of way. So,
It would be treated like city property.
yeah, it's the right of way. So it gets a little dicey in terms of ownership, right? But at that point, anything that happens in the city's right of way is,
Is it an easement?
no, right of way.
It is
It is an-
it is a right of
It is a
way.
right of way. Yeah. And so, we would, if the property owner is wanting to, like, say they want to dig up all the grass, maybe want to put new trees or landscaping or some hardscape in there, or irrigation, or whatever the case may be, we have a big discussion going on about that. We're going to ask for a frontage improvement permit, because we still need to make sure they do locates. We still need to make sure that they don't damage the sidewalk or something. So that's how.
Is that the label for the city strip, is frontage or?
Yeah, frontage, street frontage in the right of way, that planning strip. So we call it planning strip. We call it, that's the right of way, and that's also frontage improvements. Like if you were going to build a house, and you're required to do what's called frontage improvements, because that's not your property, but you still have to do that in the city's right of way. So yes, they're kind of interchangeably, we'll hear those different. So city property, let's say it's an open space, the next column, we're still under city property, but this is now somebody that's complaining about a protected tree. And so removal of that is just not allowed. But again, if we really agree with the fact that it's falling, over, it's going to hurt somebody, then the city will actually agree to replace it and replant it.
And the
we-
definition of protected there, it comes from where?
The protected tree is coming from the DMC. So it pulls into the landmark tree and those trees that are, fit that criteria for being protected. So, and then the other tree is the one that's going to be on the property that doesn't fit that definition for the tree preservation ordinance, right? It's a tree, it's on the city's property. It may be a very small caliper. It may be,
So my neighbors that planted their own tree there, that's.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if it's again, it's always about, is this a healthy tree? Because this is a healthy tree and it's causing it not any problems, then we're just not going to agree to do anything. But if there's a good compelling reason and we agree with it, then again, the same thing. We would remove it. It's on our property, and we would replant with another tree, because we are trying to not lose trees. Then you flip over. So, I mean, that all on the city property, you can see we have a lot of control because it's the city's property. But the way our tree ordinance was written on the private property side, there isn't a lot of protection for trees in people's private property. So, if, again, unless it's a protected tree, our code is pretty clear that it's a healthy, protected tree, and we would not allow, because you do have to have a tree permit, we wouldn't allow that removal. A disease or hazardous, they can replace it, but we want them to replace it with an approved tree, but it's still on their private property. So they have the ability to have some free agency there on their own land. If somebody is asking to remove and this is all about new development. That's the thing. I'm going to need to make a note on this. We're talking about new development, not existing development. So the code that was written is saying that if you were going to construct anything new or do a new subdivision, looking forward, then new development, new business park, and you're going to have to cut trees, then you have to go through this, even though it's private property, you have to go through this tree permit process. And otherwise, if it's an other tree and it's on somebody's own land and it's not related to any new development, then we really don't have an ordinance that says they can't remove their tree. So that's something where I think we need to, we're in the coming, months, we're going to want to talk about that when we talk about how we want to strengthen our tree preservation and our goals to make sure that we're not losing tree canopy.
So this would only be Northwest, this includes Northwest Landing. It was the new development at the time it was constructed, so it does include Northwest Landing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. And one thing that people, do, I think oftentimes are confused about is that Northwest Landing has its own CC&Rs. They call them covenants, codes, and restrictions. And so if you live in Northwest Landing, when you buy a home there, you are contractually bound to follow the Northwest Landing's CC&Rs. That does not supplant the city's land use and development, all the city's ordinance are citywide. So you may have 2 layers if you're a Northwest Landing. You're still always subject to city code and regulations. And then you may also be, having to follow the ROA CC&Rs. So it's kind of like not one or the other. People don't, it's difficult because they're like, well, I'm following this. And so, but
I think the Village is the only place right now that doesn't have both
the
layers.
Village and El Rancho Madrid.
Oh yeah, El
Yep.
Rancho.
Yeah.
Can I ask then, on the commercial owner association, like where is the line? So the warehouse that faces Center Drive and DuPont Stilichon Road, where they just let everything die, but they're supposed to replant. Like I'm sure they had mitigations
Yeah.
when they were built. And so they were supposed to replace vegetation, and that whole row is dead. Not only that, somehow they replanted it as a curtain when we were specifically advised not to do that because that's the wind just blows them down. So that's all dead. So who is that? The commercial owners? Is that us? I mean, who makes them perform their mitigation, and what happens when their mitigation just didn't work, right? They put it in the ground, never watered it, boom, it's all dead. So bad us. What's next for something like that?
That's a great question. And that's always the bane of our departments. But what we have to make sure that we're doing when we are conditioning approval of a permit or providing approval with some mitigation measure is that there is also a monitoring plan in place.
Mhm.
And that if that fails, then there's actions that we can take. Now, in your example, I honestly don't know whether or not that was in place at the time.
I don't know if it was
And then there's the-
mitigation. I know that it had to be replaced plantings. You weren't supposed to be visible from the
Yeah.
road. So I just don't know where it fell on this. It might have been one layer deep, might have been mitigation for trees removed
Yeah.
as it was being built, but the other layer is somewhere in the
So-
CCNR beautification, but, is it that hole that allows nobody to go forward and say, make trees grow here?
Yeah.
Um,
Well, if it when the city's condition, then really what should, I don't know how it was written, but usually you're saying like, yes, to get your permit, you've got to comply with this landscaping requirement, and most developers do. The missing piece may have been what happens. You also, not only do you have to plant it, but you have to keep it alive.
Yeah.
And that's usually what you want to make sure that you're doing. And I just don't know historically what happened there, Commissioner. But anyway, so protected trees, here's pictures of the protected trees, some of the protected tree types that we have. And again, this document was just really put together to try to help the community understand.
Yeah, no, it is very helpful. And the protected trees on the back, or the second page, that I think is very eye-opening, because those are, pretty much all the same trees that we were talking about with the native species and going into the heritage tree program. So they really cross paths with that. So this is super helpful. So this is now a document that is in place that the city's using.
Yeah, we put that out, as a handout for just to help people understand, when do you need a permit? When can you cut a tree? Yeah. But I also thought it would be helpful for you to understand like what we're working with now and what we probably want to talk about in terms of making it a little
Yes,
better.
and so the street tree list, that is now,
They-
yeah, go ahead.
So I just want to say that those two slides were like a great conceptual schematic. I wish Stilicum could do something like that. But, and I have lots of comments on them from my experiences over there. But I'm going to hold those for now, and just for the rest of us, I would hope that, so I would hopefully we'd be able to talk about the DNR funding opportunity, because there is a timeline on that.
Yes, yes.
Oh.
So
If
I
we
just
could
wanted,
Switch to that.
yes, I just wanted to mention the street tree list, because I know that we don't have them in front of us right now to look over. I printed them out, but they are done. They were sent, and then I got a call the next day saying, don't send those ones out. I'm going to edit. So Kevin had sent the edited one. So then I sent it out, and that is something that we can look over next meeting, since we didn't have time today. But yes, grants and funding, we'll go ahead and start with the DNR. And even though I haven't had a lot of time to look through there, it looked like there was a lot of resources as far as watching webinars. If it's your first time applying, I don't know if we've applied
Yeah.
for one before.
Can I like?
Yes, go
summarize
for
a
it.
bit? So I didn't look at all the webinars or anything. I started to read the document, the notice. Have you?
I
looked at
skimmed,
it?
absolutely skimmed.
Okay, so I'll just recap some of to me, the highlights. So the State Department of Natural Resources put their request for proposals out. They want to give away $7 million to municipalities, other government agencies, nonprofits. The grant funding amounts that they're interested in giving away are from $10,000 to $350,000. So like the first category of $10,000 to $50,000 grants would need to be spent by June 2025. And then for the larger grants, it goes out to June 2027. And the scope for what you can use it for, as far as I've seen, is extraordinarily broad. It could be used for policy update work. It could be used for planting. It could be used for street tree program development. It seemed pretty broad. They don't require matching funds, which is great news for small municipalities. And it also said that not having matching funds would not impact the competitiveness of the grant. And then the due date is January 8th. So that's why I was kind of like, we should definitely fit this in, even though I was incorrect about my assumptions last meeting. I'm sorry.
No, that's,
But
I
this
mean,
is there. And everybody should try to use this. As the novice here on the commission, I would suggest that to me, the no-brainer thing to do would be, at a minimum, get some of this money to make a robust guide for the citizens with the street trees that they have a responsibility to maintain. And so to get some professional consultation to develop, this is the most economical way to replace your street tree if it needs to, if it's impacting the sidewalk. And then in addition to that, some assistance with the heritage tree program possibly, or whatever else, the city staff. But yeah, it's there,
Yes.
use it.
So how would that process kind of go? I know we had talked, I think when I first started, about, grouping together a couple commissioners at a time that had similar interests or were able to work on a project together and have them meet with the city staff person so that we're not having to have a meeting every time. And I was kind of thinking something like that with this, having, a separate work team where 2 commissioners work on this together and then are able to bring it to you or work on it with you to get it processed.
So I think what this does is gives the city money to hire a professional to do that, so that we don't have to do that. We just need to
Okay.
describe what we want done.
Okay.
Is that
Yeah, I think we're just, exactly what we would be doing is getting our best grant writing minds together to write a really compelling grant. And I think,
That's what I was thinking.
exactly. And in that scope of work, you're going to have budget to hire somebody to do whatever it is that we want to use this money for. And so I think that's since it's not a lot of time to get it in, I think we really need to nail down what we think we should apply for. And then I can get estimates, and then we can maybe put some of us together to start working on the grant writing. So back to, the ideas of a professional guide for citizens on street trees. I heard that. Help with the heritage orchard. I heard that.
The tree
I mean-
plantings, because we have the trees in our nursery that need to be planted.
Planting
that would be-
trees.
Urban forestry chapter design.
I mean, there's so many things when you start thinking about it. I still want the inventory really, really bad.
The inventory can be
But-
done as part of
you know,
that.
Should we just
So I
start
mean, we're
sending-
really going to have to just decide what it is that we want to make an application for quickly. And so maybe you all might want to think about it, and then maybe what I could do is send out an email with a list of things, and then we could we can't take a vote because we can't do any business with outside of this forum. Let's see, how will we do that?
I mean, could we make a list and then from that, those categories could have subcategories, or does it have to be super specific on?
Usually your best grant is one that's really focused.
Okay.
We want the money to do this because we need to do this. And you just really want to keep it, it could be a big project, of course, but it needs to be really focused.
Okay.
so? I would suggest the best way would be for if you could send out the list to us all of,
And don't reply to
The
all.
options.
If
and
you,
then we individually could reply to you
Yep.
if we wanted something to add.
yeah,
And then we have that list at the beginning of our next meeting. And our next meeting would be to figure out what's number 1 and then get that description done.
in November, I think we could still do that. I think so. So we're making this decision in the public because we need to do that. So our November meeting, then we could make
It
a
would be
decision.
December.
December. Oh my gosh, you're right. So then
So
that
it
gives us some,
Give us,
that gives us
a
some,
little bit of time to,
not much, but did you look at the grant application? Is it a difficult one?
I don't know what a difficult or not difficult grant application.
Usually it's like how many pages?
I did, so it's the last few pages of, I didn't see anything in there that was. So there's one thing about, there's a couple little scores that need to be looked up, like the economic impact, but it gives you the website to go
Okay.
find that information.
Those are easy. Yeah. Yeah.
And,
Good.
and the crux of the hard part is the language of describing what you want. It
Yeah.
seemed to me when I just reviewed it briefly.
And getting the estimate to do it.
Yeah, oh, yes.
Yeah. That takes time because then we're relying on. So I don't,
That's probably the big tent or the big pole that's hard to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
unless we want to do a special meeting just for that. So we're not putting, let's see, when would our December meeting be? December.
I don't have my phone on me right now. It would be the second Monday. I can look up that.
The 11th.
The 11th. See, that is kind of late, isn't it? For a January
I can
1st.
come in Thursday and Friday, and work on it.
We
But I
just-
have
we
an
just need
agenda
to-
already.
We just need to decide what it is that you all think we should apply for.
Urban forestry. There
That's a-
was a separate grant that for sidewalks. I know there's other ones for that are not climate adaptation. And I can find that, but I know there's one that the city submitted for and got before to do sidewalk stuff. I guess it almost would come down to what don't you really, out of the priorities that are coming up, what is unlikely to get touched at all if we don't get outside money for it? What's the biggest thing for the city right now?
Well, I think the urban forestry is a big one. Yeah. And that's a big category. So when you were saying, well, could it have subcategories? I mean, it could have a lot of tentacles that maybe we could, under the urban forestry scope, one would be, of course, you need an inventory. She can't, and then you need to come up with some policies and regulations. So, I mean, I think that would be a good one. I know that, the Heritage Orchard is really important too. So I guess I kind of want you to all feel like there's some consensus on what it is that we do.
So I'll offer my thoughts and then hopefully other people will offer theirs. So I think the planter strip problem, giving guidance to the homeowners is probably the best value for the citizens that they would appreciate. I know for us here, the revamping the tree protection codes were very appealing, right? But so revamping the tree protection codes involves the planning commission and the city council, and it's a big process where there'll be public hearings in the process, and so that could be a big separate thing. But that sort of thing, I think, happens as like a whole of government process. It's not something that's containerized as easily for the outsource. So that's my thoughts on those two.
I mean, I think if we are able to come up with some options and send them out, I think I'm having a hard time in my mind just prioritizing and even knowing what would have the most value. But I know the Heirloom Orchard, that would be one just to get like stabilized, and I think it's a good community investment. However, I know there are bigger things like the urban forestry or the policy that could be put into that. So it's really just about prioritizing what are the main ones.
Where I lean with Alex on sidewalks, but I think is that to get community engagement on trees, you can't get hurt by them. And we have some lethal sidewalks, but I don't think getting a grader, I don't think spending time to do a grant when we could be grading the sidewalks or doing something else right now to keep people safe and then have doing the urban forestry and canopy and maybe even under the guise of that to replace some of the trees that aren't, I mean, it's how big you can make that grant, right? Like you were saying, like circle it all in together.
Mhm.
So there's a safety piece that causes people, I hear them say it, damn trees, the roots on my sidewalk. That interferes with our community engagement to have that. But they could be graded down for safety. And I would rather see the money myself go to the big picture so that we move forward on our major developments in a way that we aren't living with this again. Really. So that's.
No, I don't have any.
So when you're thinking about a scope of work for a grant for like the planter strip, I mean, you could also roll in the guide for citizens. What is it? What would be the important things there to take the trees out that are, so is the issue, so I'm trying to think like a review of a grant. So is the issue that we the whole, let me talk me through what you're thinking there.
So when I say that, my presumption is the city doesn't want to alter at all its current policy that the homeowner is responsible for the planter strip and the tree and their front yard. And so my idea is that some a professional, landscape installer, arborist, whoever looks at the problem and says, this is, if when your sidewalk gets uneven, the way to do it is to, do you just cut the tree off and then you can plant right next to it? Or do you need to cut the tree off and then the stump needs to be ground? Do you need to plant exactly back in the same spot? Can you plant 10 feet on either side of it? Can I plant a little sapling from the approved tree list that's very small and inexpensive? If I do that, what kind of watering do I need to do? Or do I really do need to plant a larger tree that's closer to mature size? Where are the best places to get these trees from that are on the approved list? Just sort of kind of walk them through all that, because the person that's not interested in trees like we are, they don't know that, and it's just a problem that they know is there that they're going to ignore as long as they can until somebody makes them do something or trips and falls in front of it.
Can we do that? So the future development, we would want all of that covered in that urban forestry plan anyway, and then we could pull it out to become new policies. Like, right, the research
Yeah.
for the maintenance
You
plan
may be able to,
could be part of the urban forestry
Yeah.
plan, and then we just spread it out afterward and make it relative to the whole city.
right. We could do that. Yeah.
There you go.
See,
Yeah.
see what mine's
To
thinking
be
alike.
honest with you, there are actually, this problem has been happening for a long time. So you can probably look up in some places, they have actually specification how deep what kind of a tree, how deep it has to be dug in so the roots can.
Right,
Go
yeah,
out.
yeah.
So-
It's all out there. It's just not all in
out
one
there.
spot.
We do not have to invent anything. We
Right.
just try to get in from an area. Just that's the only part of doing the research.
Mhm.
So, so it sounds like we're in agreement that, a
A
a
creative writing
broader
project.
scope, a
Uh-huh.
broader scope of reevaluating and updating. tree
Well, we're
code.
going to be adding an it's adding, which should get us some street cred on getting the grant. We're
Good.
adding all of this,
Right.
and then we'll have specific bullet points we want to
Yeah.
add.
So what I think I'm hearing is that this is under the umbrella of what all belongs in an urban forestry plan or program. You know, there's the big thing. And so then we could maybe pull out street trees and this piece on street trees and what is needed to ensure that our street trees are healthy and the right kind of tree and they're promoting that canopy in neighborhoods. Yeah, I think we did really good here. I think
And there's
They
a-
shade
you've given me enough to
the
work with.
tarmac, right? They shade it, and so they are a critical piece
Mhm.
for
For-
climate. That's one of the reasons, that was what we went into with Larry on why we chose the street trees. Taller with a wider canopy because
Mhm.
they have to cover the tarmac to cool the city.
I think, like you said, if you're creative, a lot can fit under urban forestry.
Yeah.
I mean,
So this is good. And so I feel like you're all like there's consensus up there about what we're gonna do. Head nods, yeah.
yes.
And so then what we need to do is get a couple of people to help us work on the creative writing part of it.
I volunteer.
Thank you. Okay. So I'll reach out to just Bridget and we'll, anybody else want to help with creative writing, grant writing? Okay.
Sure, my inbox is open. You can include me.
Okay.
And do the happy thing.
So Bridget and Alex, we can put together maybe a couple of initial work sessions and parse out who's going to do what part of this grant writing. And that's always the easiest way to get it done. So perfect. Thank you.
We will go ahead and move on and we'll talk about the orchard another time since we are out of time. But I did want to maybe on a one-off with you have that conversation about what that looked like as far as the LTAC money and all of that. You'd briefly kind of let me know that that's an option, but I don't know what all goes into that either. So that would be a
Yeah, I mean,
separate-
yeah, and I don't mind, we've got a few minutes here, but the LTAC funding source for the heirloom orchard. So the LTAC funding is really geared towards heads and beds, right? Tourism. And so I think it will be a good funding source when we get the orchard to that point.
to where
But we're
it can
not
be used for
there.
that.
Now we just have
Gotcha.
to figure
Okay.
out and I think that, the suggestion about putting a plaque on it and really stuff fencing and really getting, and yours, like, we got to get this maintenance under control. We've got to get, the bones of this orchard, under control and put a plaque on there. And then we've got some work to do, I guess,
Okay.
is what I'm saying.
Okay.
And we need to figure out how we're going to tackle that. A plaque is pretty easy. And I think we can find funding to get a couple of the signage would be good. People walking by, we need to figure out what we want to put on the signs. So maybe at our next meeting, that could be, some suggestions on what the sign should say. Because that's easy. It's nice to
Okay.
have some easy things to do. Mhm.
All right. Moving on then. Any other good of the order?
I have good of the order. I'm going to pass out my little flyers. So the Moon Tree event happened. You don't have to hear me talk about it until we get our Artemis tree.
Mhm.
I'm going to ask for an Artemis tree at some point.
It's Bridget's artwork.
Word on the back. Eric one. So that was our coloring page. And then Kelsey had a tree scavenger hunt, which she'll bring next time. So the Moon Tree event was very successful, and there were more than 100 people. So it was a community engagement event. It was our first rollout. We worked with Chloe Clark's PTA, their STEAM person came, helped us organize. Kelsey moved a lot of hot chocolate, which we need to thank Kelsey and Starbucks for supplying the hot chocolate and the cake pots. And we had cake pops, we had moon pies, and the TASS came with their telescopes. And I don't know if you saw any of the pictures. And so everybody was we weren't able to see the moon. It was 100% cloudy. But we had the video up, and so you could see that happening around the world. The tree planting event itself actually got rained out. Like we were out there, and then it just started to come down in buckets. And so I ran through everything really, really quickly. And then the rain stopped. And so we were shoveling the dirt in before it would turn into mud. And then all these people showed up, and they weren't even there for the Chloe Clark piece of it. They were there to see the tree planted.
Oh,
And I thought that was really something. So I'm like, okay, we're like soaking wet now. And we're just like, okay, I'm going to read the comments and everything. And so we went through the formal part of it and presented. So the picture is the plaque we actually presented to the school. It had an astronaut and a tree. We had a council member, Beth Elliott, show up to be the mascot in an astronaut in a spacesuit. And we had another little boy come up in the most authentic spacesuit I've ever seen on a kid. And so I don't know if you saw the pictures, but we had both of them planting the tree later. And I just want to thank Larry Clark and his team. I was trying to think of the guy that helped with the backhoe, but I mean, he was on it. Shay from the school helped. They had all the sprinkler extension run. I mean, it was a real big team effort, a lot of community engagement. There's space over there for more trees. So hopefully we can get an Artemis tree next and put it next to our Apollo, which I discovered is a half moon tree. It's not a moon tree, it's a half moon tree. And so that's all. And Muhammad came to take photos and it got rained out. Mike Farley offered advice afterwards. He went over there and inspected how the tree had been planted, and Kevin helped us get it looking its best. Everybody's really happy with how the tree looked when it got planted. And
Great.
yeah, families, PTA. So it was the whole community involvement that we were looking for.
do you have some pictures that we could put on the website to send us?
We do have picture. You mean for the tree?
Yeah,
tree
for
board. Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
let's put some pictures up on your webpage.
Okay. Yeah, a lot of them went out through the school, but it really was a joint
Yeah.
effort.
Thank you, Bridget, for pulling that all together and really working hard to make sure all those pieces got in place, because it was a lot of moving pieces towards the end.
Chair Clark, in light of good of the order, just a reminder for those of you that need to renew or submit an application again because your term is ending. That will be due next week, I believe.
It said the
Those that it's applicable
15th.
for, yeah,
So
it went
that's in 2
out, so
days.
it's due next week. Oh, that's this week.
Yes.
Time's going too
That's in 2
quickly
days.
for
That's
me.
why I did my
So. for
Is it
those
me
of-
too, or am I on my second year? I know it's you
Should
guys.
just be Muhammad and I.
Correct. It's
Okay.
just Commissioner Shakat and yourself. So that's due in a couple days. If you'd like to reapply to continue on the tree commission board, advisory board. Did you receive a letter, sir?
Sorry, I didn't understand you right now.
Sorry?
Sorry, I didn't understand you right now.
To reapply.
Yeah, oh, yes.
Okay, so just a
I'll
reminder
make
to get,
sure about that.
yes, please. Thank you.
All right, and we'll go ahead and adjourn tonight's meeting at the Tree Advisory Commission of DuPont at